Hello, everybody. It's Brian Perry and
Julie Perry.
Julie Perry.
That's right.
That's
You
who that
forgot
is.
my name?
I didn't forget. I was waiting for you to say it.
Okay.
And then I got the blank stare. And so
it was a
here we are.
test. You failed.
Okay.
All right.
So anyway, Perry Home Solutions update today. We have a couple of topics. Usually I don't even know what they are. Today, I really mean that. Sometimes she sort of gives me a hint. Now I literally have no idea what we're talking about. So Julie, what are we talking about today?
All right. Let's start with in the same I guess vein that we were talking before, 72 sold program.
Yeah, our 72 sold program.
And how that is being very effective in helping our sellers. One of the problems that we're solving for them is buyer delay.
Right. Yeah.
And so what that means is the amount of time from the moment that the buyer sees the house to the moment that they decide to make an offer. And the longer the time that goes by from showing to offer, how that could decrease the ultimate offer that they're willing to put on the table, and how we solve that.
I don't think I have anything to add to that. You nailed it.
All right, we're done.
Well, so just to recap, so with 72 sold in our marketing program, we're solving a couple of major problems. What we talked about on a previous video was the first problem is the amount of time that a house sits on the market in general causes you to get less money for that house on average. Yeah. And it becomes rather dramatic after it sits for a period of time.
Correct.
So now that's problem number one that we solve. Problem number two that we solve is, okay, after a buyer sees the house, and then and when the buyer sees the house and then they're delayed in making their offer. So in other words, I guess the best way to describe it would be an actual description of it, which is usually the best way to describe something, generally speaking.
Good, yeah.
And so a buyer sees a house. If they really love a house, it's extremely common. The buyer submits an offer right away. In other words, that day or the following day. Statistically, if they do that, one day after showing, you get 99.2% of asking price, statistically. Mm-hmm. And then if it's 2 days, that goes down to 98.5. If it's 3 days, it drops down to 96%. So you just lost 3% after 3 days. So in other words, if a buyer sees the house, every day that ticks by that they have not made you an offer means that if they ultimately do make you an offer, it's extremely likely that the amount that they offer you will be less, and in many cases significantly less, if that day count is prolonged even further than what they would have offered basically at day one. Mm-hmm. And so through our psychological selling system and our methods of making sure that we're putting your property in the light that's going to maximize the time in which it sells, this is how we mitigate these problems. Time on the market and buyer delay. And these not only, they have a double effect. Effect number one is they allow your house to sell faster, but as a consequence of all this, it also means that you net more money because of that. Correct. So it literally is selling faster and netting more money.
Correct. Very good.
So those are the two major problems we solve, and we'll go into some other little tactics, later. But that's that. Any other questions on that one?
I think that explains it.
Okay, cool. All right, V, what else we got?
Good. Now, on the general real estate world, we're going to talk about something that comes up, thankfully not very often, and yet often enough that it, I think is a good topic to cover. Mm-hmm. And I hope I'm gonna say this correctly. Polybutylene pipes.
Yes, polybutylene.
So let's talk about what polybutylene pipes are and why sometimes they could cause issues with closing.
Yes. Brought to you by MAPS Coaching, by the way.
A plug.
What?
A plug.
A plug, yes. And what was the question? Polybutylene. Yes, if you can say the word polybutylene, post it on our Pair Home Solutions Facebook page, and we'll send you a gift. We'll come up with something good.
Yeah.
Because if you can say that, you're impressive.
Yes.
And if you could spell it without looking on the internet, we'll give you an extra gift. Because that's the hardest word to spell in real estate. Yeah. I promise. Anyway, so the question is, what do you do with a poly?
Yes. What are they? Or, well, I guess they're a type of pipes, but.
We may have covered this in a previous video, but we'll dive back into it because it comes up around here. So basically what happened is sometime around the 90s or so, mid-90s, I think.
It's like 80s and 90s.
Okay, fair enough. But anyway, a lot of people use polybutylene, and it's just type of plumbing, type of pipes that are basically like plastic and they're just known to leak, right? And they were somewhat prevalent in that time period. And so insurers don't like it, and inspectors find it. They find it every time. And so if there's a house with poly plumbing, you're going to have a problem. It's going to be an issue, okay? And so there's a couple of ways to mitigate it. Of course, number one is, fix it, replace the plumbing. That's pretty expensive. I mean, that'll usually range somewhere between $10,000 and $20,000.
Depending on the size of the house.
But depending on the size of the house and whatever they have to do.
How many bathrooms?
A huge house certainly would be higher. The cheapest you'll probably get it on any house would probably be like $7,000. That's like literally the cheapest. Probably at least 10, 12 at least. Anyway, don't take my word on that. It could be different because I'm not a plumber.
Contact your plumber.
Yeah, this is not plumbing advice.
Exactly.
Anyway, but there are a few ways around it. In other words, our insurance person, who is fantastic, by the way, they have the ability to write insurance that would allow the buyer to replace it after the property's purchased in a very short window of time. So oftentimes we can navigate through that, but it will be a problem. It will come up in an inspection report. If a buyer is getting financing, it will be a somewhat prohibitive factor in their ability to obtain that financing. So
because financing is tied with insurance. So if you have an issue obtaining insurance, therefore you won't be able to obtain your financing.
Yeah.
That's why. Yeah.
So it's something that you're going to have to deal with one way or the other. We're very skilled at navigating it. We've sold many homes with poly. We've had it replaced. We've negotiated around it and everything else. And I think that's the major things you need to be aware of. I'm not aware of any insurers that insure a house with polybutylene plumbing once it's revealed. So it is something that has to be addressed.
Yeah. Very good.
Okay. Anything else?
I think that covers that.
All right, everybody. Well, thank you for joining us today, and hope we brought a little bit of value.